Good.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Allison Skaberg, and I run the ADDA Attention Deficit Disorder Association support group for Fort Bend County, and we've got people that join us from all over, not just in Fort Bend County. And this group was formed, I don't know, I guess we're going on 5 years. ADDA has been around since 1987, and we formed this parent group about 5 years ago with the idea of supporting parents and families with children that have ADD, ADHD, and other related disorders. For those of you that are joining for the very first time, we're glad you're here. We're glad that you heard about us. This is a group that it used to meet face to face prior to COVID, and we met the last Tuesday of every month at Sugarland Baptist Church is where we met. And what happened was we would have a parent group, and we also had groups for your kids too. So we had an elementary age group that was run by a medical professional that works with special needs. And then we also had a high school group, kind of middle school, high school group. And so when the kids were meeting, the kids were, talking about real issues and organization skills and other kind of getting tips and tricks of the trade that would be helpful as it relates to managing their ADHD and managing the struggles that they have. So tonight we have Jeremy Angus with us tonight, and he was with our group one time before. He was a really powerful speaker and gave a lot of good tips. Right now, a lot of us are struggling right now, and if you are, you're not alone. And we've had to adapt to so many things with learning, and a lot of our kids that are ADHD already have learning difficulties. And some of them are gifted and talented, and some of them are dyslexic and struggle, and dyscalculia, and some of the other issues that come along with it. So you're not alone. You're in the right place. We're here to provide resources. We do have a resource share night, usually about once a year. And if you're new to this meeting and you haven't received that document, there is a document that other parents, we've all put it together, different resources, tips, and ideas that might be helpful to you in your journey and kind of what you're dealing with. So if you would like that, you can certainly reach out to us at the email. And actually, it's Fort Bend. It's FT Bend, ADDA-SR at gmail.com. So there's a little typo on that. But Jeremy, without anything further, I'm going to turn this over to you. Let's see if I can advance the slides here. I am Allison Skaberg. I am a volunteer for ADDA, and I run a holistic financial planning firm that serves special needs families. So I am a parent. I have 4 kids. I have 2 with special needs. And so I live this personally and both professionally. So I understand where you guys are at, and I'm happy you guys have decided to join us tonight. So Jeremy, I'm just going to turn everything over to you, and when you're ready for me to move the slides, you certainly just let me know.
All right. So as she said, I'm a licensed specialist in school psychology. So which just means that I have a license to work with behavioral kind of modification in the schools, which they don't let us do a lot. They usually want us to do more testing. So we did do a little testing diagnosis. I worked in various ranges of ages, but most of my experience was early childhood. I worked a lot with pre-K kids. And then I had a lot of experience with teenagers as well. So if you want to go on to the next one. So I just thought this was funny. I understand. I mean, there's really nothing more frustrating than behavior, especially behavior you can't control. And go ahead and go to the next one. I thought this topic is really interesting. A lot of people don't. It's really hard to understand the concept of behavior being communication. And I also want to make sure that people know that I'm not trying to, because this message is misperceived and mistaught a lot as a hug it out method. And it's not about just being super kind and nice until the child responds to it. It's not really about, never really being upset and things like that. I'm going to talk about why those are important, but I approach it really from a more scientific perspective. And rather than just saying like, hey, you should do this, just do this. I really want to go into more detail about like why we should do certain things. So go to the next one. I liked this a lot. It's something I kind of remind myself is that I can't, nothing I say will teach me anything. So if I'm going to learn, I have to do it by listening. And what I mean by putting that first is that if you want to understand behavior, you have to stop trying to control it as much and really try to start trying to understand why it's happening or what could be causing it. So go to the next one. So this is the things we're going to talk about. The one that the investigation part, number 3, is kind of the center of it. And I put that at the center because that's the one we'll talk about the most, about how to identify certain types of behavior, because that's kind of the nature of the presentation. I figured most people would be here for that. But these are the 5 sections we'll kind of go through, because these are all different types of methods we hear a lot about and talk a lot about, but I want to kind of go into some more detailed discussion about them. So next. So calming, not cranky. Go to the next, please. So I tried my best to put all the different types of behaviors that I hear about a lot. This one's pretty obvious. I see this happen a lot in grocery stores. Grocery stores are a really interesting place to have bad behavior. It's public. So not only are you frustrated, but you become embarrassed. And I think that's something that parents don't really notice as much when they're out and about, is that when other people see your child behave badly, you're going to react more than you would in a situation where they don't see it. Next. I like these kind of quotes. This is just a really interesting thing that makes a lot of sense. If you sit down next to a child and look comfortable, this is kind of supposed to be a little bit humorous, but I've seen it very, very frequently. And the reason being calm is so important is because when a child has lost control, their brain is looking to the environment for signals that it's safe. And so the more parents, the more people in the room who are also upset will cause the brain to panic. Go ahead, next. And I always start out this presentation, I always talk about this, and I know it's talked about quite a lot, the order in which who needs to be taken care of first. And the reason for that, again, is that if you can be cognizant enough to calm yourself and start breathing while you're observing the behavior, not only does it help disconnect you from the behavior and pull you out of the emotional, social side of it, but it also gives your brain the resources it needs to think, because the brain cannot think very well when it doesn't have oxygen. And just like the picture shows, if you attend to the child first and you try to get the mask on the kid and then you pass out, you're both in trouble. And that's it. You see this a lot with the parenting guides. They talk about this a lot, but you can't do anything for anybody else until you take care of yourself. So go to the next one. So these are just some different kind of talking points. Negative behavior is very, very frustrating. Like that, every time I talk to a parent, this is the kind of thing that bonds parents. Like if you don't know another parent and you're out and about and they see your child acting up or you see their child acting up and you catch eyes, there's kind of that, yeah, I know, it's rough. Like, and it's one of those things you hear about a lot. It's like that old quote that if you have one child, you're a parent. If you have 2 child, you're a referee. There's a lot of humors, a lot of jokes, there's a lot of banter going back between parents and teachers, parents, and anybody who works with kids about behavior. And behavior is always a huge topic. The problem with the fact that it's so frustrating is it blocks your problem solving. One thing I notice a lot with teachers or with parents is I'll come in to help with a behavior and we'll solve it. And they're like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Oh, wow, I wish I would have figured that out earlier. Man, that would have been so great. A week or 2 weeks goes by and I'm watching them dealing with the same exact behavior, and they're back to lecturing or trying to explain to the child why they don't like the behavior, doing the things they were doing before. And then I'll pull them aside and say, that's the same behavior. And they're like, no, it isn't. I'm like, listen. And they breathe. I tell them, like, calm down and look, watch what they're doing. And they're like, oh, wow, you're right. And that's a huge issue just culturally. I feel like a lot of us in today's culture, we do not go back and pull data from previous interactions. We don't remember how we got through this before because we're so preoccupied with what's happening at that moment. So yeah, he just hit his sister. Well, he did last week as well, and they're both still alive. So we're going to be fine. And we're going to solve this just like we did last time. But if we don't remember that we've made it through these things because we're so kind of wrapped up in the current event, that can be a problem because the brain just doesn't look for solving problems when it's focused on just the problem. Child behavior reminds us of adults. Now, the reason I put that is because it's something we talk a lot about in research, is that as soon as a child starts using fairly coherent language, even nonverbal children, if they interact well, they may not talk a lot, but they're still walking around. They're still, the way they interact with people, the way they dress, and your brain gets tricked. It's like, wow, look how well they're doing all these things. This is a huge problem with smart kids, really intelligent kids that I see, is they're 5 years old. They typically act as if they're 7 or 8, but every once in a while they act 5, and the parents are like, I don't know why they're doing this. I have no idea why she just took this clay and spread it all over the living room. I'm like, because she's 5. And like, but she never does that. I'm like, because normally she can function up here, but everybody has off days where they're tired or they don't feel good, and they start to act their age, but you're not used to that. So this seems odd. And so sometimes we have to remember, am I really upset because what they're doing is wrong and what they're doing is going to cause a problem? Or am I kind of associating it with an adult interaction I've had, and maybe their child's not intentionally doing what I think that they're doing? Another thing that's important, one of the calming reasons, is kids cannot listen to you when they're scared. It's when fear takes over, it's not going to work. It doesn't work with adults. It doesn't work with employees. It doesn't work with prisoners. It doesn't work with human beings. When you have a human being who feels scared or feels in danger, their body, their brain starts to cut off things it doesn't need. For instance, digestion. The body will cut off digestion. Bladder control. Hence why a lot of children, when they get scared, they might urinate themselves or something. Processing problem solving, things like that. The brain starts turning off things like, I don't need this stuff because I just need to run. And so when you have a child who's in a scared state and you're trying to sit there and talk to them, their brain can't really process a lot of that auditory information. And so also, of course, our bodies respond to the put interpretations of behavior. So the way we respond to behavior, our bodies are responding to it as well. I've got some articles I put in the back that there's any they should watch or read, is that the research on how your body physiologically reacts to bad behavior, to crying specifically. Increased blood pressure, heightened awareness. You show a lot of different signs of hypertension when you hear your child crying, and that's just a biological response. A lot of parents, or specifically mothers, don't realize that they're going through. Another thing that it's important to kind of think of when you're doing this calming thing is to remember, misbehaving is really learning to behave. And that's a really, really good way to handle any kind of behavior, because we are taught incorrectly from our past that kids will do well if they want to. But the truth is, research shows that kids will do well if they can. So if a child is misbehaving, you want to take it seriously. I don't say you just want to blow it off. You really want to be serious about it and handle it well, but handle it the same way you would if they were struggling tying their shoes, or if they're struggling learning math, right? They're learning how to do these things. And every once in a while, they go back to what used to work. So let's say a child, when they put their shoes on, they tuck the strings into the side. Well, that works, right? They're not going to trip on them, but it's not a good long-term solution. So you sit down, you go, no, we're going to tie it. They do it a few times, they get frustrated, and they tuck them. Now that tucking isn't going against you. They're not misbehaving. They're not fighting against your will. They're just going back to what worked. Because we do that all the time as adults. We constantly go back to old behaviors that we're not proud of and that we're not happy and we wish we could change, but they keep popping up because they're familiar. And so that means that they're already built somewhere into the brain, and the brain just uses them because they're there. Reaction is the fuel of behavior. So again, calming yourself is huge because your reaction can change everything about a situation. And the reason I like saying to stay calm rather than say being nice or being loving, I know that sounds kind of stoic to say, but it's important to think about the difference between being calm and being loving, right? Loving is, it has a certain place where you hug the child and you hold them and you talk to them. But calm means you're just kind of not reacting. You're not jumping into the situation. And one of the perfect examples in behavior that you see that a lot with is when children get hurt. You'll see them running around, they're playing, they're having a good time, they fall, hit their face, and they look right at mom or they look right at dad. And what it is that the brain is saying, I think I'm damaged, but I need confirmation. So they look to you, and if you go, oh, they're going to start to cry because they're like, oh man, I'm hurt. I don't really know how to identify hurt. I don't really know how to identify what happened, but I'm hurt. Help me, and so that's when they'll fall into it. But sometimes you'll be like, you all right? You good? All right. And parent goes back to what they're doing. The child's like, okay, if I were hurt, they would probably be the first one to tell me I'm probably fine. And so that reaction happens all the time. It's not just with falling. It's with hitting their sister. It's with taking food they're not supposed to. It's with screaming. It's with anything. If they get that feels good to them, because as soon as they get that, they've got your attention. And if they have your attention, they're the safest person in the room because you're the protector. You're the person that's designed, your purpose in that home, your role in that home is to keep them alive. And they're very aware of that. So if you're looking at them, whether it's a lecture, whether it's a conversation, whether it's a reprimand or just stop it, like in the store, just that, it doesn't matter to them that you're upset. It's all that matters to them is that they've got your attention. And as soon as they have that, they're going to try to hold it as best they can. So that's why calming is huge. And that's why I also put at the end, kids won't play with a broken toy. And a great example of that is that when I interact with, I've worked with some pretty heavy behaviors, some pretty rough kids over the years. It's some residential treatment facilities and places where they're not really part of the general population. And when you see them getting pumped up and you can see that anger coming, the best thing is to just kind of like this. If I flex up, if I stand up, if I put my hands in front of me, I'm sending nonverbal signals over and over. I can hurt you. I'm a threat to you. You better be careful around me because I'm stronger. I'm more powerful. And so the brain starts to either try to come up with a plan. Can I knock this person down? Can I attempt it? Can I kick him in the leg maybe? Can I throw something at him? But the brain doesn't react. It doesn't know what to do with somebody who's just turned off. And this is the kind of calm I'm talking about. I'm talking about no eye contact, face drooped, shoulders down. You get nothing from me. And there are videos of parents trying this with like 3-month-old babies. And it's really interesting because the baby will point and the baby will smile at mom and the baby will clap, all the little things that babies do. They'll move around, and I guess it's more like 8 months, but the mom will laugh and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden the mom will turn away. And when she looks back, she's like this. And you see the baby go, okay. Baby points, nothing. Baby laughs, nothing. Baby smiles, nothing. And then the baby gets really upset, like, oh, I don't like this. And it's really interesting to see how fast a child at just that age reacts to it. And the thing is that they get upset because the reason they start to cry isn't because they're sad. The reason they cry is because I tried everything else. And a baby doesn't have a lot of things in their repertoire. I've got pointing, I've got laughing, and I've got smiling, and I got crying. So I'm gonna try that, I'm gonna try that, I'm gonna try that, and I'm gonna try that. And The hard part about working with behavior, and we'll talk about this later on, is the fact that the behavior will keep trying different behaviors until it finds one that works. So that's why the calming part, that's why I put it at the beginning, is that if you want to be able to notice and really analyze behavior, you have to pull yourself out of the situation really socially, because it's usually more of a social drain because it's your child and they should be following what you say, and you've worked so hard and now they're, and it almost feels like betrayal. I feel like I've talked to a lot of parents about that, is when a child misbehaves or does something that seems super intentional. Like, I told you not to touch the TV, you touched the TV and now it's broken. So that makes me think that you intentionally touched the TV in order to break it, because my brain just made that connection and now I'm mad at you because you did something inherently wrong and mean. All right, go ahead to the next one. So I put some good old-fashioned self-soothing techniques, because if it's a rough day and you're dealing with a lot of behaviors, and you'll notice that there'll be certain days where the behaviors are just off the chain and they just continue to happen. You're like, what is it about today? Sometimes you got to think, am I calming or am I staying at that same base level? Because the way stress works, stress has a threshold. Everybody has the same threshold for when they go into panic mode, or when they just become upset or they start yelling. There's this certain threshold, but people have different baselines. Some people start way down here, so you really got to work at them before you're dealing with somebody who's upset. Some people, they start about here, and so it doesn't take as much. They hit that line faster, and then they're off to the races. Now, one of the things you got to remember though is that stress has to have a time to come back down. So let's say one of the good examples, I was talking to a parent about it earlier, is hey mom, hey mom, hey mom, hey mom, hey mom, right? What happens is, if you look at the way stress works, if it doesn't have time to go back all the way back down to its baseline, which is self-soothing, calming, they're going to hit you right up here with just the words, hey mom, and it'll push you over that thread. What? And then you get that explosion, and the brain starts running calculations like, ooh, that took 12 moms to get that explosion. That's really interesting. What a fun toy this is. I wonder if I can get it in 10 next time. And all of a sudden you become a game to them. And that's why really trying to, if they're sitting there going, hey mom, right? You say, please don't say that. And you just calm yourself down and you just try to disconnect yourself. Now, kids will doggedly pursue you sometimes, and we'll talk more about that. But really trying to focus as much of your attention. And if it takes you leaving the room or passing it off to somebody else and saying, look, I need you to handle this right now because I have to reset, it's huge. Calming is one of the biggest things that you want to really start it out with. So next. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think we had any questions. Yeah. So humorous and not humorless. So go to the next one. This one's just a nice little quick thing. I thought this was funny. It's just, this is really hard for me because sometimes I've worked with behavior so much that a lot of it just seems funny to me. And it was kind of part of my training, is to see it as kind of funny. Like, okay, well, I guess you're going to throw that on the floor now. Like, you're still going to clean it up, but I don't, and there's something about approaching it from a humorous perspective. And I know that can be really hard sometimes depending on the nature of the behavior. And that doesn't mean every situation needs to be handled with humor, but it can be a really powerful tool. So next. And this is a pretty good example too, is that, it can be a pain, but sometimes it is hilarious. There are some times where you're like, why did you say that? Or they'll say something in public, or they'll do something lewd, and it's just, for some reason, it just kind of gets you chuckling and you laugh about it. And you're like, I shouldn't laugh. I'm supposed to be mad. I'm supposed to be mad. And the thing is, there's nothing that ever research has ever shown that being mad is going to solve the situation. But it's what we've seen, and it's what we know, and it's what we think we're supposed to do as parents. Is that by being mad, they know I'm serious. But you can still be serious and throw in a joke every once in a while. You still can be serious and be light about it. You don't have to be mad in order to make an impact with a kid. And most of the time, If you're mad, again, you're causing fear receptors to pop up. So you're limiting the resources the child has in their brain to calm themselves, because they're diverting. It's like Star Trek, like the idea about diverting all the power to their shields, right? Like think about that. You've got an engine, and you put all of your power into protecting yourself against a mad adult. You have nothing left to calm yourself down or to really handle the situation well. Next. This one's just, kids are just silly, and kids have a tendency, us as adults, the world feels very, very serious. It does. And there's a lot of very serious things going on. And sometimes we just forget that we weren't born to be serious. We have been told that an adult is a serious person. I'm supposed to be an adult. So I'm supposed to be serious. I'm supposed to handle these things a certain way. But those were just ideas that were passed down to me by people who struggled really badly with parenting. So I don't know why that they should be the ones that we really rely on and be like, yeah, you're right. Maybe we should all just be very serious. And it's really funny when you think about the complaints that people have in their old age. They say, I feel too tight, and I feel stiff, and I feel rigid, and I don't, it's because we don't move. We sit seriously because that's what we're supposed to do. We're very stern. We're very quiet. We're very subdued, and the way we think we're supposed to be. And then long terms, we're like, oh, why do I feel like this? And it's like, because of your behavior, the way that you've chosen to act as an adult. Next. So with the humorous thing, it's hard to get mad when you're being silly. That's another thing that helps with the calm. Sometimes if you just come into a situation and just chuckle to yourself just a little bit, even if they're screaming the top of their lungs, just stop and think, what are you doing? Like, that's the difference. What are you doing versus what are you doing? Like, the way you say it can change your perspective of the situation entirely. And that's one of the things I hear a lot from parents, especially parents that work with kids that have autism. They say, I can't just ignore stuff like that. I can't ignore screaming. I'm like, well, then, get headphones, like you're at a gun range. You can put them on and sit there and go, okay, well, I can see that you're screaming. It's not hurting my ears or bothering me, and I don't know how to solve it. And it's not everything's an emergency. Now, of course, if there's self-harm involved, I'm not going to say that every behavior is not an emergency, but sometimes certain behaviors feel like emergencies at the time, because we feel like if I don't handle it right now, my child may carry this behavior on forever. And that's not always the case. It's sometimes behaviors just show up because they're testing their environments. So you're not really letting them off by not being serious. You're just making learning fun, and they're learning. This is learning to them. They're learning how to behave. And when you're watching a child and they're throwing a temper tantrum, try to not think, wow, I can't believe they're acting this way, and think, I wonder what their brain is telling them. Their brain is the one that's telling them to throw the tantrum. And that's how you start to notice and really figure out what's behind the behavior. Like, I wonder what the tantrum is for. Is it because now they've got my attention? And, what is it that's causing that? But coming at it from a humorous perspective, like I showed that little GIF at the beginning of the girl throwing a tantrum, it's kind of funny. It's kind of funny to watch somebody just freak out. You're like, okay, like, that's cool. Like, I guess, you didn't want that toy anyway, so now you broke it. Now you don't have the toy, and that sucks, And like I said, if I walk into a situation where a 17-year-old ODD, ID kid has just fought an orderly and punched him in the face, and everybody's all high strung. Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? And I walk in, I'm like, you punched him in the face? Like, what is that gonna do for you? And they're just like, I don't know. And immediately I disarm them. Immediately they want to talk to me, because I'm just like, what's going on? And it's just the way I say it. I'm still serious. I'm not saying, wow, nice job. I'm just like, really? That's your decision? That's what you decided to do today? And out of all the other parents, all the other adults in the room are saying, that's not okay. You shouldn't have done that. That's not all right. And he's just being force-fed information. He's not having a chance to really work through what happened. He's just being told what he did wrong. And that's why I like to approach it from a silly perspective and really get them engaged. Look, if they know when to be silly too, that helps. So, playing silly with them a lot, or just being silly in general, kind of just helps lighten moods. And it'll help too, because if you're out and about and they start being silly, I can't do that right now. Wait, just wait. And so they know that you can be silly. They kind of anticipate it, and you'll see less attempts to try to get silliness out of you if it's more regular. And a lot of the kids I meet on YouTube, they watch adults being silly. There's a lot of YouTube families where they're all being silly. There's a lot of YouTube child, look at the Steve from Blue's Clues, the Wiggles, all, the Big Couch. I can't remember the name of that show. But kids are fascinating with adults that act silly, because it's not normal to them, because again, our society has told us that's not our role. We aren't supposed to be silly. We gave that up when we were 12 because we got a job. There's a lot of research that shows that there's a huge detriment to us mentally because we let a lot of that go. And laughter has a lot of different health benefits. It increases your immune system. Your blood pressure goes down. Laughter is really, really important, and it needs to be part of as many interactions as possible. You can laugh your way through a bad interaction or a bad behavior. It can be done. And if you ever show that, by being silly and being kind of weird, you kind of you show them some vulnerability. And I think parents are afraid of showing vulnerability because they want to show assertiveness. They want to be in control. But the problem with that is most kids that have parents that keep that idea, kid turns 18, 19, starts to really understand the parent and be like, wow, you had struggles too. I never knew. And then they have a weird disconnect from it. And it happens a lot with teenagers. Teenagers start to kind of see behind the veil and realize that most adults are struggling too. Like, we have our own problems, and we may not always want to pay bills. And it's not like it's exciting to be an adult. It's just one of those things where you're like, hey, I go through this stuff too. And that's something I work a lot with my own kids. And when I work with other kids, I tell them, yeah, I used to do, talk to a kid the other day that he was a second grader and got in a fight, got in a fist fight. And the first thing I said to him is like, yeah, I got in a few fights when I was younger too, man. It doesn't lead to anything good. Has it been good for you? Has it helped you fighting? Is that good for you? And he's just like, well, I guess not, because I get in trouble. I'm like, yeah, that's going to happen a lot. And you get a lot more trouble as you get older. And so I gave him some vulnerability. Yes, I used to have bad behavior too. Let's talk about the bad behavior together, instead of you being the only person who's ever just been bad in history, And it's just something that we don't think about really comparing or explaining to them. Like I said, like you're teaching them how to ride a bike. You're like, oh, I get it. This was hard for me too. Versus, come on, man, you can do it. And putting them on the bike and pushing them and go, you can do it. But we're forgetting the fact that when we were 12, we struggled with riding a bike and fell 5 times. So they're going to fall 6 times. Maybe they'll fall 10 times. But that's okay, because failure is part of learning. And like I said, if we approach it from a humorous perspective, we can kind of handle those failures a little easier. So next. This one, I'm sure you guys have seen this. This is kind of goes around Facebook a lot. Kids laugh 400 times a day, adults maybe 15. So somewhere along the way, we lost 385 laughs a day, which is pretty crazy. It's pretty significant. Go ahead and I don't know if anybody has any questions about that. It doesn't look like it. All right, so the investigation, not interrogative. So you want to be investigative and not interrogative. So the way that I explain that one, here's another one. You see a kid do that. That to me was always the most frustrating when my kids were little, is when they wasted food. I don't know why it bugged me so much. I remember I used to get so upset when they would spill drinks, and it just, I don't know why, it just felt like, what are you doing? Like, how hard is it to hold a cup, right? And then I would spill a drink and I never thought of it. And then one time my son was like, I don't want to be rude, but he was like 7. he was like, I'm just curious, how come grown-ups can spill drinks? And I was like, what? And I was like, he's like, because when you spill a drink, you just clean it up. But when we spill a drink, we get in trouble. And it was the same approach. It was that, why would you do that? You know, that's the interrogation. Like, what is wrong with you? Why would you make that mistake? Versus investigating, like, well, what happened? Is there something wrong with the cup? Is it that, oh, well, it's too big for your hand? You know, instead of looking into the problem, sometimes we jump right into why did you make this mistake versus how do we not make this mistake? So next. So understanding why a child's behavior is the first and most important thing. So this is the part that this presentation is kind of based around. Those first two things are kind of getting you set up, you know, kind of try to be a little jovial, try to be calm. Now we're going to go into the investigation part. And so next. And then, of course, empathy is seeing through the eyes of another, listening with the ears of another, and feeling with the heart of another. I thought this was important to think about because, and I kind of want to put in there thinking with the brain of another, because the child brain is an amazing how much that they develop in the first couple of years. It's absolutely crazy. But we forget the part of the brain doesn't finish developing until 25 on average, you know, mid-20s. And the average person, if you really think about it, the part of the brain that finishes developing last is the most frustrating part about parenting. It's executive functioning. It controls planning. It controls risk management. It controls emotional regulation. So when you're dealing with a child who's not showing emotional regulation, that's under the age of 25, it's probably not their fault. And I hate saying that because a lot of parents are like, okay, you know, like it sounds like a cop-out. It's not really a cop-out. It's the equivalent of saying to a child in a wheelchair, you should be able to walk. You should be able to because I can. And our brains tell us that. They go, they should be able to do this simple task. I can. And one of the examples I give a lot to parents, go ahead and go to the next slide so I can have that up. Is talking about the concept of learning. Beethoven was arrested for when he was trying to teach piano lessons. He ended up beating up a kid, and it sounds awful, but it just shows that his brain was just so upset with the fact that this child could not adapt to the level of skill that he already had. It just drove him crazy. He just and it happens all the time. People, one of the things I try to be really, I work a lot with dads and parents because I don't think dads get a lot of support necessarily. And I used to struggle pretty badly with anger issues. I'm a yeller. I would yell really, really loud because my dad did it and I thought it would work, and it does. Everybody gets real quiet because everybody's really scared, but it made it where I couldn't really develop a relationship with my kids, you know, and I really had to learn how to do that. And one of the things that really helped me was going to school and realizing, once I realized that my kids weren't misbehaving as much as just making a mistake, right? Like a kid might punch his sister in the face. I use that example, or steal something, or take a cookie when they already said they wouldn't, or just scream because they didn't get what they wanted. You took their iPad away. Now they're screaming. All of those things, if you think about it, like they got a math problem wrong, right? Like that's going to happen. Or they're trying to learn how to walk and they fall over. They're all the same thing. They're all behaviors that are being taught and they're learning. So next. And so that empathy part really helps with developing that understanding. And so this is where we go into this idea again. Kids do well when they want to. A lot of the parents and the teachers I work with, of almost any generation, that is what we think. We think that they actively choose. And it's funny because I talk to so many parents and I hear this all the time. Oh, well, you haven't met mine. And I'm like, I always say, has your child ever tried to set your house on fire or kill you in your sleep? And they're like, oh God, no. And I'm like, then I've met worse. So as I'm saying, it's the same concepts. People do not want to be bad at things. People do not like to throwing fits. They don't like having giant meltdowns, but they may not have the tools they need to avoid it. And if we're approaching it from a changing or stopping the behavior from happening rather than treating the symptoms or treating the underlying cause of the behavior, we're only going to be putting out fires all the time. We're going to constantly be putting out behaviors, because behaviors, again, going back to the beginning of the purpose of this, is that behavior is communication. So here, this is where we really talk about what does that mean. So basically what we're doing is something that they call, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys ever worked with a school psychologist, but they'll do a thing called a functional behavioral assessment, an FBA. And in the schools, they're not that great. It really depends on who's doing them. But the purpose of a functional behavioral assessment, and since this isn't a scientific course, I won't go into so much detail, but I did list an article in the back if you want to learn more about it. But the whole point is to figure out what is the function of the behavior. What causes the behavior to happen again? Because what we found in research is that behavior has to be rewarded. There's something that rewards it. And our job as parents is to figure out what that is. And sometimes there's things that will trick us. And so we may see, for instance, little Susie throws a fit right before lunch every day. And so you might think, okay, well, maybe she's hungry. Okay, that makes sense. And so you try to give her a snack before, it doesn't work. Like, okay, well, she's just being bad. And it's like, well, let's look at it again. Let's really try to figure out what's going on. So we watch her go to the lunchroom at school. And it turns out that where she sits at lunch, the sun is in her eyes. So we ask her, like, does that bother you? Yes, it does. We put her on the other side of the thing, behavior goes away. So what seemed like it was being rewarded, or it seemed like she was being rewarded by throwing the fit so she can go to lunch earlier, when really it was something completely different. And that's where the functional behavioral assessment really helps us to analyze the behaviors and look at from different perspectives. But what I want to talk about is a simple way of doing it. And like I said, if there's any questions at the end of how to do like a full one or different ways to get templates on how to do one, they're really interesting on different things you can sign. So as an investigator, not an interrogator, because remember, interrogating means questioning the person about their motives, right? That's what interrogation is. We want to know the motive behind the behavior. The problem with this is with kids, it's not as much of a motive as it is a skill deficit. So we have to investigate to find the skill deficit that's causing the behavior, not necessarily the motive. So for instance, what's the situation? You come into the situation. This example is you walk in, behavior is happening, right? I guess we'll go with probably one of the most frustrating ones is just a complete meltdown. Let's just go to the very top of behavior, right? So you walk in, kids on the floor, screaming, throwing things around, and your first instinct is go straight to the kid, right? You want to stop the behavior. Behavior has to stop. And so is the behavior still going? That's the first assessment you make. Because if it is, your instinct is to stop the behavior. But going back to the calm thing, your instinct should be like, okay, watch what's happening, look around the room, collect some data while trying to calm yourself. Because this is a crazy thing I've seen happen a handful of times. I was working with a child and I walked in the room. I was actually at a different campus and they called me and they're like, Jeremy, we don't know what to do. This kid, he's autistic. It's his first day and he hasn't stopped screaming for 2.5 hours. First thing I was like, well, they should have told me that they were bringing in a new kid with autism, but that always happens. They're not always telling people what's going on, with kids coming in and out. And so I was like, okay, so I'll be there. And my principal said, that's fine, you can go. So I went to the school, I walk in the room and I see what I always see in a lot of these situations. One child screaming, 4 adults asking what's wrong. And just right off the bat, the first thing I thought was, that kid's brain is terrified. And this kid's nonverbal, so he can't hear them anyway. Plus, he's so upset. He's so upset at that point. His brain doesn't have any capacity at all for disseminating auditory language. You guys are all sitting here, probably after work. You've had a long day. So you're probably at points struggling, like, okay, he said that, oh, I lost track. My brain went off, So here you are, not throwing a fit, not in some kind of emotional distress, and auditory processing still takes extra steps. You got to hear, I have to send sounds into the air. They got to go through the computer. They got to come back to you. You've got to translate them. You got to put them together. You're looking at the visuals. You're trying to piece it all together and kind of make sense of it. If you're on the floor screaming, that's not going to happen. And also, I looked at the kid, but then I looked right at the adults. I wanted to see their faces. And sure enough, 2 of them looked mad and 2 of them looked worried. And so again, I'm looking at him and he's looking up. He's kind of looking around the room. He's not really, he's autistic. He's not looking directly at their faces, but his brain is capturing that information regardless because it's panning. He's kind of throwing his head back and forth. And so there's a lot of nonverbal cues that tells him you're not in a safe place, because the only people in this room that could protect you, they have no idea what's going on. They're completely confused and angry. So if a threat enters this environment, you're not going to make it. So his body's in pure panic mode. I don't know where I'm at. My mom's not here. I'm away from my family, and these people are no use. So I went up to them and said, just leave him alone. Let me handle it. So I went and sat right next to him. And, he's throwing his head back and forth. They had put a helmet on him. He had stopped. He was headbanging at first. We got that to calm down. But when it got I got him down to just screaming. I was like, I can handle screaming. I dealt with it enough. So I just sat next to him. I didn't look at him because, again, the way you got to remember the way eye contact works is I always try to picture that I'm sending a beam, kind of like Ghostbusters, right? That just wraps around the kid and gives them all the energy they need. It's just that eye contact. So I'm like, I'm not going to look at you, but I want you to know you're safe. So I sat next to him. I closed my eyes and I just sat there and breathed. And I listened to him, and I was trying to listen for a break. And there's always a break. There's always that moment where they go, because they can't infinitely shoot air out. So they have to take a big gasp. And as soon as they did that gasp, I would turn, open my eyes wide and be like, hey. And he would go back to screaming and I would go right back to this. And so what I did was I turned myself into a toy. I was a toy that would only come on when he would stop screaming. And because this kid was low functioning and like I said, nonverbal, it took about 15, 20 minutes. So it wasn't an easy, fast thing, but it was a heck of a lot better than 2.5 hours. And he started to test me. And it was funny, the adults were like, I didn't think he had that much cognitive ability to actually mess with you. Like, I knew he would do it. So he would go, and I would look away. And then he'd stop and I'd turn and start playing with some blocks near him, not necessarily trying to pull him in, saying, look, I'm the tough guy in the room and I'm fine. So we're fine. We're probably safe because I'm just doing this. So I kind of tried to distract him and he would let out a shriek and I would just stop. I'd drop the toys and I'd stop. And he started to realize, like, okay, every time I scream, he goes away. And that's not what I want, because I feel safe around this person because he's got his stuff together. He seems calm. And so it's just a real quick, I had to throw it together on the fly because this kid needed to learn. And that's how I handled him every single time he threw a fit, is I would sit next to him and just breathe. Because also, while autistic people may not pay attention as much to their environment, their brain is still looking for evidence. What do I do? And when he sees all the adults calmly breathing, his brain's like, I guess that's what I should be doing. But if all the adults are like, what do we do? What do we do? Oh, it's your fault. It's your fault. Oh, you shouldn't have done this. Why are you doing this? You need to calm down. Their brain's like, I guess we're going to yell and be upset because that's what I'm seeing. That's the information I'm getting about how to handle this situation. And if
Jeremy,
yeah,
we have a question. We have about 10 minutes left for tonight, but we have a question, and this question resonates with me. I know that I felt this many, many times myself. But what do you do if you have a child that is constantly forgetting? And I can say this for my own child, constantly forgetting basic responsibilities, like just basic, this is how we roll. What do you do? And especially when grounding or other things don't seem to work, or the kid melts down with the grounding. Do you have some suggestions? I mean, the forgetting is a real issue with ADHD.
Oh yeah. So ADHD, can you guys hear me? Because I think my Zoom crashed again. I'm just not going to touch it.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm just going to leave it be. Yeah. So the thing about ADHD is that ADHD is a physical disconnection between two important parts of the brain. One is the knowledge of what to do, and one of them is the knowledge of how to do it. And one of the examples I give a lot is I saw a kid walking, and it was a teenager, and the teacher said, "Hey, tie your shoes, buddy." And he was like, "Okay." And he walked about 2 more steps. He knelt down, looked at his shoes, got up, and started walking in. And the teacher's like, "Hey, come here." And he's like, "What?" And she's like, "You totally ignored me." And he was like, "No, I didn't." And he was completely confused as to what had happened, but he wanted to defend himself because humans, we just naturally kind of defend ourselves. But what had happened is he went to do it because he was told to. But while he was about to do it, he couldn't find the file in his brain that tells him how to do it. So his brain's like, "File not found, go." Just like a computer. "Oh, can't find that file, just move on." And so he did. He just moved on. And so when you talk to ADHD experts, a lot of it is that having procedural reminders everywhere. And I do that for myself sometimes too, just for, like I told you earlier, I do tax returns. So I have ADHD, and I have to set myself a reminder when I meet with a returning client. One of the things I always forget to do is like, "Hey, did you change phone numbers?" Because there's nothing worse than they leave and I'm like, "Okay, I'm done." Oh, phone number is disconnected because it's been a year. They probably changed cell phones. I didn't think to ask. So I create myself checklists. And so what you can do, depending on their age, you can have little things posted up. They're like step by step by step. That way, too, it's also really important to have rules posted around the house, because that external stimulus can be seen by both eyes. Therefore, they can make it to the part of the brain that actually knows how to do it. And that can help a lot. Visuals are huge. And they're just
One thing, Jeremy, that I think as a parent, so my daughter is 17, she'll be 17, so we're getting up there. We're not in the grade school. I think one
yeah,
thing as a parent, I needed to set realistic expectations as a parent. So first and
yeah,
foremost, so the forgetting is, I mean, that's classic ADHD, the forgetfulness and that kind of thing. And so one of the things, and I'm not saying lower your standards. I'm not saying that, because I have pretty high standards for my kids too. But realizing and remembering that the maturity of their brain, so although you might be looking at a 17-year-old, that they're really functioning at a
how about
13
15?
14-year-old, and they're not, so the age is where they should be, but that's not where their brain is functioning. And so I had to lower my expectations a little bit. And I also found, in your earlier, when you were talking about like kind of staying calm, um, everything goes to heck in a handbasket quickly if you lose it as a parent. And it's
Yeah,
easy to lose it because these kids are tough. And but it doesn't go well. So I so agree that the calmer that you can stay, like when everything else is falling apart, the better. But what we try to do, because the grounding doesn't work, all of the negative takeaway things are ineffective. It was with my daughter anyway, is I tried
yeah,
to have more of I tried to more reward what she was doing right, because they always feel like they're doing everything wrong. Their teachers tell them this, the parents tell them that, other kids tell them they talk too much.
ADHD.
And so I tried to reward when she got it right. And that seemed to motivate her more to get it right more often. And the checklist on the mirror, then on the nightstand, or the reminder in the iPhone, whatever it was, we had a lot of checks and balances and reminders, and it is exhausting and it's maddening as a parent. But I just really had to bring myself back to the center and realize that there is an underlying condition, and it is called ADHD. And this is the kind of the pinnacle of what we're dealing with. And when I brought myself back to center, things went smoother with my own child. But this was something I was like, seriously, do I really have to tell you every day to brush your teeth? Do I have to tell you that? It's almost laughable, right? But I don't know. So I just wanted to share that, because I have definitely felt that. And then there was another question in the chat, and I know that we're running out of time, Jeremy, but Are there any substances other than medicine that helps calm a child that you would recommend? They heard that caffeine helps.
So with ADHD, stimulants have basically help bridge that connection. And that's why things like, Adderall and Vyvanse and stuff like that are usually recommended for ADHD, because it can help bridge that connection between what to do and how to do it, right? Procedural knowledge versus just social awareness. And caffeine, a lot of people with ADHD typically use a lot of caffeine. It's not as effective, but it does have small stuff. And I'm not saying this for a recommendation, but that's why you see a lot of adults with ADHD smoke cigarettes, because it's stimulating. And so their brain kind of craves stimulants to an extent. Caffeine in small doses can be helpful. I personally, I take a substance called synaptitol. It's kind of a natural, just falls on your tongue. It's safe for kids. It's not non-narcotic, things like that. And that's the thing that kind of helped me with mine is just you take it twice a day and things like that. But diet is big too. There's a lot of different diets. If you're a parent, and if you have a child with ADHD, it's worth looking into Russell Barkley. He's a huge, renowned expert, and he just recently gave a presentation, I think, for ADA, and he's got a lot of different resources on his websites too, of different types of approaches, because he talks about all the different types of medication that exist, all the different types of things. He also talks a lot about diet and sleep. One of the biggest problems, though, is for me at least, and for most people with ADHD, is cell phones. Cell phones make it so much worse because it feeds it. It's designed. Your brain is designed. ADHD brains are perfect for how cell phones work. So it's just constant stimulus, constant shifting, constant novelty. And so it makes it really hard to work on one thing that doesn't embrace a lot of novelty, because your brain gets bored when it's been exposed to a lot of things like that. But I do know that tea is really good. I don't know if you can get your kid to drink tea, but the caffeine that's in tea specifically helps with working memory. Whereas the caffeine that's in coffee is more of a stimulant, a body stimulant. So if you're looking for something that's going to help with actual concentration and work, I would stick with anything that's tea-based caffeine.
I just put something in the chat box that we personally we saw a functional medicine doctor, because my child had issues with medication, and we had some success with something called it was through Hardy Nutritionals, and it was daily essential nutrients. And basically, when you read about ADHD or autism, they talk a lot about the fish oils or the DHA. They talk about magnesium, vitamin E, D3. There's a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of research about that. But anyway, what I would tell you is check out Hardy Nutritional's website. They have a lot of information out there, but they were good. They were really good, a good alternative, and really helped a lot. So that was just my own experience. So I would share that and we've tried, some medicines and, couldn't take that. Some kids can't. And
Yeah.
so, that is a real issue, but some of those functional medicine doctors out there, what they will do is they will take like extensive blood work. I mean, we probably had 17 tubes of blood, and we knew exactly what that child was deficient in, and what she needed for her brain to be functioning as optimal as it could be. And so that was something that we found helpful.
And I will say, Allison, you brought it up earlier. I'm a huge proponent for rewarding. And again, the problem with taking a reward versus punishment stance is that people are just like, nope, this is how it works. Punishment is the way to go. That's how you raise a child, because that's how we've been taught and it's how we work. But the quickest way to kind of disprove that is just look at traffic tickets versus slot machines, right? Like traffic tickets are a perfect example of a punishment that parents give. It's random. It depends 100% on the person delivering it. If a cop decides they want to give you a $300 ticket, a cop decides they want to give you a $200 ticket, it's their decision. They can decide to give you a warning, and so your brain has no way of telling how the punishment's going to be delivered, how intense it'll be, and how often do you get pulled over when speeding. It's not constant. But whereas you can win a slot machine once and then blow $5,000 trying to do it again, because rewards, and that's, look at our phones, look at video games. Video games are a perfect example of why rewards work. You never have a video game just cut you out and be like, you suck at this, you can't get in it anymore, sorry. They don't punish you. And you play games like shooting games where you die, but you come right back. There's no real consequence at all. It's all rewards. And you're like, why can't I get them off video games? It's because their normal life is not rewarding.
I think that they just have to have some wins, and
Yeah.
I think and depending on the age of your children, if they're younger or newly diagnosed or grade school or whatever, these rewards for what they did right, even though sometimes, find that one thing. If it's only one thing, find that one thing. It matters. And these are the deposits that you're making now for when you come into the teenage years. If you're not already in the teenage years, there's so many challenges that come into the teenage years, and these deposits now, I really feel like they make a difference for sure. So Jeremy, we've run out of time,
Well,
and
sorry guys,
you have,
I didn't just stick to the PowerPoint very well, but I
well,
hope.
you've got a lot of slides, and we have your slides. So I think what I would like you to do, if you could just take 2 or 3 minutes, and what we will send out the slides to everybody, so everybody has the whole presentation that they can go to, and then also Jeremy's contact information as well. Are there, two or three things, like right now there's so many struggles right now with this pandemic, and alternative learning, and just people just overwhelmingly stressed because of how we've been living for the last year. Are there any takeaways in the midst of that are tips that you could give the parents here to help them with their journey as they're navigating all of this?
The biggest thing is that public school teaches you that failing is bad. It is your job as a parent to remind a child that failing is part of living. Just go back to when they were learning how to walk. They failed a lot, and you don't remember any time. You remember their first step, but you don't remember their first 1,000 falls, right? And they need to think that way too, moving forward. The second one that I could say definitely is that if you're going to come to a solution, it needs to come from them. What you're trying to teach them, and please watch, the biggest thing I can tell you is watch the video I put on is how to rethink bad behavior. It's at the end of my slides, but this guy talks about problem solving, flexibility, and frustration tolerance. We're starting to realize that those are things you can have learning disabilities in. And we don't think about that. We only think about learning disabilities when it comes to reading, when it comes to math, when it comes to writing, but we don't think about it when it comes to behavior. And if a child is not allowed to come up with the reason, not allowed to come up with their own solutions, and you're constantly providing them, they'll always be your solutions. So when they get to a certain age, especially teenage years, when they're trying to figure out who they are, the first thing they're going to do is get rid of all your solutions, because they're trying to develop their own personality. But if they came up with those solutions, if they're the ones who designed the calendars, and they're the ones who designed the checklists, and they're the ones who put together the thought journals so they can keep track of their ideas, that's their ideas and they love them. They'll feel more attached to them. It's just like if you're working. You don't want a manager who comes in and solves all the problems, because now the business cannot survive without that one person. But if you have a manager who empowers other people to solve problems, you have an entire team who's capable of making their own decisions.
That's really good. That is really good and really true. And I think choices too. Like so sometimes, like, it seems weird, like if you've had this child and they've had this horrible behavior or something, and clearly there has to be ramifications, whatever it is. Like, you give the example of them kicking a teacher, whatever. Um, but having choices of acceptable, like together sitting with a child and saying, okay, there are consequences for your actions and misbehavior, and putting this together with them, right? Mm-hmm. And then actually giving them choices, like, so here's the 3 or whatever, and then them choosing that. That was something that was effective too. It sounds weird, but it was effective. It was like, okay, I do know that there are consequences.
Yep.
so that definitely worked. I wish we had 2 more hours to just go through
And just real
everything.
quick though, on that, I'm sorry, if you are going to use punishment or consequences, you have to do it the same exact way every single time.
Yes.
So like I said, if you're doing tickets where you kind of pull them over whenever you feel like it, it's never going to work. They're going to speed, or they're going to speed in a different road. If you build a machine in a car that prints a ticket every time you go over 60 miles an hour, they'll never speed again. So you have to, that's that consistency, just like an oven. If you touch an oven, it's going to hurt every single time. You don't have to test it. You do it once, you're pretty good. And so just that, and you don't look at it, you look at it from a perspective, it makes it easier for the computer to get it. And if everybody in the house is using the same language, and you use the same exact language every single time you address that behavior, the brain doesn't have to rethink about what you're saying. Try to think about using the same exact sentence to address a bad behavior every single time. It's just like doing a Google search. If you Google search and find something, you're not going to type something completely different the next time and try to find it. You're going to type the same exact thing you did last time, because it makes it easier for the computer to get the information.
For sure. So Jeremy, I was trying to get your contact information. Do we have that on, is that on the first slide? Do we have that here?
I don't know if I put it on there. It should just be jeremy@howtobrain.com.
So jeremy@howtobrain.com.
With a number 2.
For anybody that wants to contact you. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing this information. And I would like to thank everybody again for being here. The challenges are real. I share in your parenting challenges, and you know what? Some weeks are good, some days are good, some days are not. But we are, we are a body here and kind of a family of resources. There are a ton of resources out there for you. So if you are struggling, don't hesitate to reach out to us any way that you can. We're happy to share some of the resources that we've put out there before in a PDF. I mean, we have, I think it's a 12 or 15 page PDF of resources for parents. And it's all across the board, whether it's, therapy or, just kind of effective activities or different things. There's all kinds of stuff out there. So, you might, take something away from that. Jeremy, thank you again. And it is okay for us to send out your slides tomorrow. We'll send out the recording, and then we'll go ahead and send out your slides since we didn't get to all of them. That's okay?
Okay, I realized I actually duplicated a slide, so I'll get that fixed and send you those, but it's not a big deal.
Okay, that sounds great. Do we have any other questions before we wrap this up? Let's see. Okay, yeah, just thank you. Are the resources across the state or just local? So most of the resources, there are a lot of the resources that are across the state, but a lot of the resources are Fort Bend and Harris County. So that is a good question. But everything from pediatricians that really work well with kids with ADHD. We always have people looking for counseling services. We have a whole list of counselors that take insurance and a whole list that don't. Psychiatrist. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff on the list, and we don't endorse. We're not saddled up with any of these people or anything like that. This is just other parents that have been in your same boat, that have had, good, bad, or indifferent experiences with things, and we've just put that information out there, and you can take it for what it's worth and kind of check it all out. So if you want that, email us. It is like FT Fort Bend ADDA-SR @gmail.com. Email us and ask us for that list, and we'll certainly send that out to you. So thanks so much for being here tonight. Thank you again, Jeremy, and we'll definitely have you back again soon. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
Take care.
Take care. Bye now.